Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. For the second in the awards show, the Best GC Rider Award. One of the most important ones, of course, is the overall Best Rider and Classics Rider, but this is maybe the second most important in the world. Maybe if you just want to win the Tour de France, this is the most important, depending on your perspective of cycling. So what criteria then, Benji, matter for our GC Rider Awards? What is a GC rider? So we don't count anything you did in a one-day race. Irrelevant.
Yeah, kind of true, but the characteristics you show in a one-day race could matter. As in, first of all, GC success in 2023 matters. That's obvious. That's one of the biggest obvious ones here. Climbing level, would you say that's more the average climbing level that we count or the peak climbing level?
I think it's both. I think peak climbing level. I think when they're on form, what can they do? Because we also have consistency as a metric. So, maybe someone like, I don't know, Adam Yates, for example.
Yeah.
Adam Yates cannot go with Jonas and Poggi in any of the tour stages, but he never crumbles in any climb this year. Yep. All year, he's good on every climb. So that's consistency, but his peak is clearly just a bit below Jonas and Pogačar. So I think they're separate. There's time trial. There's your sprint's important too, because in a lot of these races, particularly one-week GCs, honestly, like Roglic won 2 of them on his sprint.
Yep. But I will say consistency, I think there's a difference between being consistent throughout the race versus throughout the year, because then you have Pogačar, for example, perfect example of being consistent throughout the year. He's there in every single GC he's fighting for. But then when it comes to consistency in the race, he's have these moments in the Tour de France, for example, on Col d'Aloz, where losing 5 minutes on a mountain stage, doing 2 minutes worse than Zimmerman, 4 minutes worse than Yates, that's not consistency throughout the race, you know?
Yeah, and there's... Who else is a good example of this? Almeida versus Thomas, for example.
Yeah,
is another one where, like Thomas is really good throughout that race, consistent in that Giro, as you sort of mentioned with Adam Yates. But then Geraint Thomas, in terms of GC, may as well have been on holiday for every other race this year. Whereas Almeida's in the top 5 of, Poland, he came second, and the Vuelta, he scratched a top 10, so he's also consistent throughout the year, but Thomas was better than him in the Giro. He was better than him in the Giro. He beat him in the TTs, which are important. So TT, obviously, when you look at the Giro next year, it's a fundamental cornerstone. Climbing, TT, punch and sprint are the cornerstones of GC riders along with their consistency. And I think who you beat matters a little bit. I am reluctant to knock the Giro too much, even though, yes, when you look at Gabriel's top 10 climber performances article from this year, you probably won't see many Giro performances, but I think you still have to get credit for doing it, and because they're longer, harder stages. It's just a different Grand Tour. It's cold, it's wet, it's attritional. I don't want to put the Vuelta above it too much, just because it's got the short stages with the flashy, the climbs like Beches, where of course you're going to do high numbers.
I agree, but I also believe that the competition it's in a different spectrum than, for example, when we talk about sprints. If we talk about our best sprinter awards, I feel like competition was more of a topic, because in these GC discussions, you have many times the better riders fighting it out against each other. You won't often see a Schelmoze pop up in a Grand Tour top 3, for example. So that's something that can happen in a random sprint throughout the year. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a factor, but it's not as obvious.
Exactly. Like even in Tour de Suisse, which he won, right? Schelmoze, he was he earned that. He didn't fluke that. He did a great TT. He rode the mountain stages even when he was getting dropped, super smart. He won the first one. I think him and Goal went clear. So... yeah, it's not like in a sprint, a split-second mistake from somebody who then jumps too early, gives you a great lead-up, bang.
Yeah.
I was just looking at the last Giro sprint. Kirsch came second, Fiorelli came third behind Cav. But I think Kirsch underrated rider. Anyway, that's you got a question on the list here, Benji. Have the requirements for GC riders evolved over the last few years? What do you mean by that?
I think it's something that is often related towards time trial kilometers in the year and the time trial skill of the top GC riders. Because back in the day, you had like the Froome versus Quintana fights where Froome had an obvious advantage when it comes to time trial. Wiggins in his Grand Tour took a major bonus in the Tour de France due to his time trial skill, but was consistent in the climbs as well. But I feel like it's odd. I feel like the requirements for GC riders often depend on the year itself and the Grand Tour routes that are presented in that year. Because let's be honest about it, the Tour de France 2023 did not have that all-out 40 kilometer flat time trial, for example, was more climbing related in that and so forth, although time trial mattered there. I have the feeling that because the top GC riders, the Vingegaard, the Pogacar, the Roglic's of the world, on flat time trials aren't that different. There's differences between them, but it's not like on a flat time trial, I don't expect one guy to take 2 minutes on another guy there, like back in the day. So that's something there. But then again, if you look at the Giro, that's where it does matter when you see a Thomas versus a...
But even there, Thomas, Almeida,
Landa?
Roglic in that flat TT were pretty close. The second one. And Geoghegan Hart beat Thomas by a microsecond. Well, no, sorry. Thomas beat him by a microsecond. I guess there's like Remco's just sort of in his own stratosphere when he's on peak shape. But you're right. I also looked at the question completely differently.
Oh.
Is there more pressure on GC riders these days to be good for 10 months of the year? And certainly it's team by team, right? UAE, they want you scoring all year. Yep. They want you scoring from the start of mid-January if you're Jay Vine, or start of February if you're Pogacar, to October.
Yeah.
Ineos with Thomas is the complete old school peak for your A race and then kind of chilling to the rest of the year, or at least he's not expected to even top 10 his preparation races before the Giro. No, actually, that's not true. Normally, Thomas in previous years would like podium the Dauphiné or Romandy before the Tour de France.
But just like Chris Froome back in the day, you wouldn't expect him in February to show up and be the best rider in every single race he rides. So I get the point you're making, and we see that Pogacar and Vingegaard have been relatively consistent throughout the year. Like, if we take a close look at Vingegaard, for example, outside of the Grand Tours he rode, he dominated at Zulia, Dauphiné, and Gran Camino. So 3 of the 4, I think, stage races he did, he kind of flopped in Paris-Nice, but let's put that aside for a second. So that's relatively dominant throughout the year, which is a major difference from last year. Do you reckon, how big is the step that Jonas Vingegaard made between 2022 and 2023, considering I feel like he's become more dominant in the Grand Tours? And second of all, he's become way more dominant throughout the year, and has he become more versatile too?
I think his 3 to 12 minute is way better. Oh, maybe 3 to 8 minute. He was already good on Monde last year, where he stuck with Pogacar. That was an 11, 10 minute climb. This year, he's just dropping people on 3, 4, 5 minute climbs in those shorter stages. Like Gran Camino, I grant you, not the biggest start list. He won every stage. The first one was neutralized. He won every 2 road stages in the TT. The TT also was a practice for the Tour de France TT all the way back at the end of February. Simulation on a hilly parcours. Incidentally, if you look at 4th, Bard Lemon came 4th there. He just got signed to Jumbo-Visma for on a 2-year deal, I think, from Human Powered Health. So I think that's maybe where he went on their radar. Yeah, and he won a lot of stages in those races, Benji, which is they're not long Tourmalet climbs. He won 3 Basque stages. They weren't long climbs. He won 2 Dauphiné stages. 1 wasn't a long climb. So, yeah, I think he didn't do a one-day race this year. Not a single one-day race.
Question. This isn't a question I have about Pogacar now versus Vingegaard, because you were speaking about Vingegaard there, but towards Pogacar, do you feel... I feel that way slightly, but I also feel like the moments where Pogacar had weakness this year are important moments as a GC rider. But do you feel like the the level difference between Pogacar and Vingegaard is being seen as larger than it actually might be due to the time trial and due to Col de Los those 2 days. Because I swear, until the last rest day at the Tour de France, I was not sure who was going to win that, because you looked at the stage that came beforehand, and we saw this pattern kind of pop up where Pogacar would make the early move, he would have the acceleration, be able to gap Vingegaard on those stages, and then Vingegaard was able to like crawl back. Now, we knew that when it comes to the larger climb in the third week that Vingegaard would likely have the upper hand, but losing 5 minutes or whatever it was, 4 minutes to Adam Yates, in my opinion, even knowing that these kind of stages are Pogacar's weaker days in the Tour de France in the last 2 years, this was completely exaggerated compared to what I expected.
Yeah, I didn't expect him to lose that amount of time, but I think there's a psychological sort of trap here with the Pogacar, right? So Pogacar, you'll see him 90% of the time being the best, right? Yeah. And being the best by not very much, though. Like Puy de Dôme, he drops Jonas, right? Jonas lost, I think, 7 seconds. Grand Colombier, he gaps Jonas 4 seconds, and you see it, you're like, that's the majority of the time. And then on these crucial stages, he's getting killed, like Renault. And then on Col de Los and on Ventoux, he lost a lot of time on the climb. Descent finish helped him. So that gap seems to have grown each year. From 40 seconds on Ventoux to Renault, it's 2.5 minutes. To Los, it's 5 minutes. Is that Jonas getting better? A little bit, but also maybe Pogacar's getting worse in that regard. Because you look at Paris-Nice. Yeah. He killed Jonas on Loge de Garde. Jonas was too aggressive, actually similar to Coulthard. Attacked on Loge de Garde off a nothing pace. Poggy in the wheel. Poggy counters him going after David Gaudu. Jonas can't respond, and he loses. He got dropped by Vauclin at Paris-Pancha. He lost 43 seconds on a nothing climb, 6.8k, 7%. But then on Col de Cuyoz, the gap wasn't big at all. And that's a 16k, 7.3% climb. And if you extrapolate that Loge de Garde gap, Poggy should be taking a minute and a half.
Yes, but I think it's the opposite of what you said about Pogacar there as well. As in, you said Pogacar has that psychological thing as well on the moments that he really falls through on Col de Los, for example. But I'm also looking at that Paris-Nice, for example, Loge de Garde, but also at Courtrai is also an example of that. In the moments, Vingegaard was probably thinking, when he makes those moves, the attack on Tourmalet, after being better the day before on the La Reine stage with Marie Blanc. And at Paris-Nice, he felt pretty good because he just won the Tour de France against Pogacar the year before, stuff like that. He knows he's on level from Gran Camino. If he then makes that move and gets countered, then he didn't realize he could crawl back to Pogacar when Pogacar countered him. Then it felt like Vingegaard also had like a hit psychologically that was like, shit, he countered me. I'm not going to make it to the line. And I feel like he matured in that during this year's Tour de France. Because that was when that's when he switched it towards, now I need to control my tempo. Don't panic. I can still crawl this back. And I feel like that's an important step for Vingegaard and a dangerous one for the future because that might make him quite dominant in certain races.
Yeah. And with the Pogacar, I didn't mean Pogacar's psychology. I meant us as viewers.
Okay.
We see Pogacar destroying Van der Poel on the Isle de Quamont in the Tour of Flanders. We see him dominating all these races. We see him dominate most of the stages in the stage races. So we will attribute him to having an off day in these big mountain stages. It's like, well, maybe that's his level actually.
Nah. I agree that there's something in there that his level is lower on those stages, but his level is not 4 minutes lower than Adam Yates on those stages, in my opinion.
Maybe. What was wrong? What was wrong then? He won stage 20.
As a thing, there is something that is causing these stages.
So it is. So that's. I mean, it's currently his level, unless he was sick, and then 3 days. So unless 2 days before, when he was good on stage 15, he was healthy. Then he was.
I don't believe he was sick.
Okay, well, and then he wins stage 20. What's wrong?
It is 100% the pattern, but I refuse to call that his usual level.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe they got the feeding wrong. On the rest day. But it's an
possible,
Achilles heel.
From the outside, it's kind of impossible for us to like see what the exact reason is for those weaknesses. But it's something that happens, and if they don't change anything, then that's likely going to be the case again in a future Grand Tour. Yeah. How much do you affect that? How much do you think that crash at LBL affected it? Because probably in some way it affected his Tour de France, but he was at a good level in the first 2 weeks in the Tour.
Yeah, I mean, Tourmalet and Courtois, he was unbelievably good. That's like one of his best ever performances on Tourmalet Courtois the day after Marie Blanc. Puy de Dôme, I think his best ever, some of his best ever 20-minute watts, 30-minute watts. Juplin, really good. They could have broken the record, but he slowed down. So, yeah, he was a really, really good level.
Yep.
And on the stages that suited him, he was unbeatable, like on the Planche de Belfi one. But yeah, I think that's, some people are saying, oh, Vingegaard's like a Tour de France merchant like Lance Armstrong. I mean, that's just not, like, he rode a lot of other races and he won them.
Last year, maybe.
Yeah.
This year, 100% no.
Yeah,
he was consistent throughout the year except Paris-Nice.
And he could have won the Vuelta. He decided to let, that Kuss would win. So,
but I would say he's still a stage race merchant, and he still needs to dive into winning proper one-day races at some point, which I think he can probably do.
Yeah.
But this year, if you do the Tour de France and you do the Vuelta, if you do stage races build up towards the Tour de France, not really the Ardennes and so forth, then you won't have those chances to show it. So I reckon in a few years we'll see at least Vingegaard winning one hilly/mountain Italian classic or something.
How do we rate Pogacar here with the second at the Tour, wins Paris-Nice? They're the only World Tour stage races. He does 2 World Tour stage races the whole year. Now, would he have done a Dauphiné or would he have done Slovenia if he hadn't had the crash?
Probably. I think he would have done something more before the Tour de France if he didn't have the crash. And I don't know if that would have been Dauphiné or Slovenia. I reckon at least one of the two. So but that happens. That's a thing that happens throughout the season. You can get injured, and it's hard for us to judge stage races that did not happen, But I feel like because of him getting second at the Tour de France and not having those other stage races stacked up, like 5 of them, for example, it's only on the Lucien and Paris-Nice, really. That's what makes it so much closer with Roglic this year and makes it an actual competition for the second spot. Because let's be honest about it, just like in the Best Sprinter Awards, which was Philipsen, I'm pretty sure we both have Vingegaard in the first place, or not?
Yeah, he was pretty good this year. You win, podium one Grand Tour, win the Tour, win Dauphiné, you win Basque Country, podium another, and win some other ones. Yeah, it's impossible not to have Jonas first. But yeah, that's why I mentioned Pogacar and Roglic is the close one. There's then a gap between those two and the rest, I think, because Roglic won everything. And where he gets knocked is, I guess, perceived level of competition and race and maybe his peak climbing performances. But yeah, he won Tirreno, won Catalunya, and won stages in those two.
Yeah.
Like, do we care about winning the stages along the way in this contest? We didn't mention that.
I think it works in the consistency throughout the race category. If you can consistently win races, that means that you're up there, but also that you might have the punch, which is another criteria for what we have. So I think it indirectly matters, but it's also the way he wins is also part of the discussion, in my opinion, as in he didn't dominantly win the Giro d'Italia. It was a last-minute clutch, but that doesn't make it necessarily worse. He was still consistent enough to stay up there, to then try and take it over on Montelusari on his preferred terrain. So that's something there. Would you say, we've spoken a lot about the kilojoules in stage and so forth, and Roglic throughout the first half of the year at least, having more trouble on stages that had more energy expenditure. But doesn't that also somewhat count for Pogacar in Grand Tour stage? Because, like, what's the difference there? Pogacar in Tour of Flanders can handle all the energy expenditure in the world, but on Col de la Loze, when it's built up after 2 weeks of fatigue, it somehow kills him.
Yeah, but he's competing against guys in Tour of Flanders who are spending even more kilojoules than him.
Yep.
He's not competing against smaller guys. He is the smallest guy at Tour of Flanders.
Yep.
So probably by the time they get to Oude Kwarman, Wout van Aert probably spent like 6,000 kilojoules or something. I don't know. And yeah, that's why the Vuelta suits Roglic so much, because they come to the base of Angleroo with less than 3,000 kilojoules. Yes, there's 2 climbs they did hard before. The intensity was really high in the last 2 hours before Angleroo, hour and a half, but it's still not a 4,000 kilojoule marathon like Bondone, but to the base of Bondone where it's a slugfest. I think Roglic, he kind of tricked me a little bit, and when he needed to turn it on, he really did every time just about this year. Like, Roglic, I mean, he came third in the Vuelta. He was better than anyone not on his own team. He won Burgos as well in preparation in dominant fashion. He also didn't do any one-day races until the Italian Classics after the Vuelta. So it's really tough between him and Pogacar. His Angleroo performance, I think, counts a lot for me, even though whether you think it was right or wrong, in that it was a really, really high-level performance. And I think that's an indication to me that I think Roglic would have probably, if Poggy has that same issue on lows, I think he beats Pogacar in the Tour de France.
I think that's a viable argument. And also the thing when it comes to Roglic is, I wouldn't describe Primož Roglic as the race strategy genius that can adapt to every situation in the race. But if we take a look at the final kilometer, he's one of the most cold-blooded killers in a final kilometer in a mountain stage, in a hilly parkour. We just saw that in Giro dell'Emilia, the fact that he basically kind of played Pogacar in that race. And I feel like that also matters, that in moments where he needs it, he has the patience to be able to benefit from it. And sometimes he benefits from the passiveness of the competition when he does that. For example, I 100% believe that if there is no headwind on Tortoreto and they don't cancel half of that climb, for example, I think he's in trouble there. But
yeah,
he still made it happen by being that patient man, by not blowing himself up in doing so, and still having something left to outsprint the others at the top, maybe knowing that they might stall in the headwind if they don't want to work together at the front. So it's kind of like, that's one of the things of Tirreno. There's, with some of the races that Primož had, on one end, yeah, headwind on Tortoreto helped him, but then on stage 6, for example, Jumbo's strategy didn't exactly help him by blowing up the race. It made the race harder for him. They could have made it much calmer, that race. So I've gone back and forth between whether Roglic would have won that or not won that, depending on the weather situation on Tirreno. But if Jumbo rides defensively on stage 6, I feel like he takes Tirreno anyway, regardless. So in Catalonia, you can talk about, okay, I think it was La Molina that Remco drops him for like 3 seconds or something. He's still consistent throughout and he delivers the victory. And I agree, Angliru is really that point where I'm like, dude, that was a level that is close to Tour de France 2020 level when it comes to Roglic. I don't know the exact difference between the two performances, but it felt like that to me. It's like, how would we rate Pogacar versus Roglic versus Remco when it comes to their punch at the end of a race? Does it depend on whether it's a flat punch or a hilly punch?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I'd probably take Pog overall. Yeah. Pog after a really hard climb seems to still be able to punch, even if he's kind of cooked. Like on Le Betex, stage 15 of the Tour, I actually think Pog wasn't feeling great when he let Adam Yates' wheel go. And then he got to recover a little bit, and he still had a pretty strong kick in the last minute of that stage. But sometimes Remco, like at the end of Low Port, went to sprint and then the lights went out and he lost 6 seconds in 20 meters to Roglic. So Oh, maybe in like an uphill burst. It's hard to say. I think overall I'll take Poggy, but I think either one on their day, on their climb, if the other makes a mistake, it's really, really close. But I think on a longer climb, I'll always take Poggy.
Yeah.
Like, for example, on in Lombardia, when he jumped away. In a shorter climb like the one in Bologna where Roglic wins in Emilia, that's a different situation.
Is it weird that on a completely flat sprint, I might consider Remco as the first?
Yeah, I think Roglic is the third on a completely flat sprint. I actually don't think his 10 to 15 seconds is as good as the other two. I think his 30 seconds after fatigue, a hard climb, is unbelievable. But yeah, I think Remco, you're right, is super aero, and he keeps winning bunch sprints like behind, like in Lombardy, for example. But anyway,
and it's also like there was that Vuelta stage where he finished in the second group, but he let it out, spent 10 kilometers pacing at the front, let out the sprint, and then did the sprint himself, and somehow still beat everyone in the group.
Yeah.
And that was one where I was like, huh? How did he do that? So, yeah, it's an interesting discussion, but let's talk about him for a second, Remco. Because, like, Remco's a weird season for me, as in his one-day record was good, like winning the ITT World Championships and so forth, also LBL, but it doesn't really matter for this entire discussion. I don't really care about his one-day record. I care about some characteristics he used in that. For example, his climbing at San Sebastian or his sprint at the end of a race. That matters for this when it comes to the punch for bonus seconds and so forth. But if we take a look at his GCs, he won UAE Tour. He podiumed Catalunya second, very close to winning. Maybe with a different strategy on La Molina, going further out, making it harder. He might have actually competed for the actual victory. But he coveted out of the Giro, 45 seconds ahead after the time trial in GC. And that is having COVID in the system in the last few days before that. So he might have had a minute or something if he didn't have COVID. That's something we'll never know. He perished on Obisque at La Vuelta, and that's like, you mentioned it before, it's like Carpegna all over again, right? Because it's not that he can't handle this long mountain. It's that he drops basically before the second half even starts of the long mountain.
Yeah, it was strange. And then the next day, he basically does 100-kilometer solo.
Yeah.
On all category climbs. It doesn't make sense. So I don't know. That's part of consistency, but you're right. I think in terms of stage racing, the COVID at the Giro really makes him hard to assess. Even the UAE Tour, he got dropped on her feet. I know he was riding defensively, so you have to say, well, yeah, Yates dropped him. Yates was super strong, but Yates had to attack, but then maybe Remco wouldn't have just been pacing at the front because Yates lost time in the crosswind stage.
Yes.
On stage one. Catalunya is the same. It's like, was he stronger than Roglic?
They were fairly similar, but I think he could have made a difference on La Molina.
Yeah. And then the Giro, even the Vuelta, like on Aronsal, was like, whew, he gapped everybody on that first uphill sprint in that mountain stage. So he's really hard to assess. One's seemingly no explanation, the Vuelta on Obisque. The other is a COVID positive in the Giro. The others were, he was pretty good. So really hard to assess. I think maybe his peak climbing level not as good as last year. That's just gut feeling. I feel like, what was it? That first week of the Vuelta last year was super impressive. Les Perez, the wall, Erlites in San Sebastian beforehand, Pico Jano on stage 6, Fanquire on stage 8. Really, really impressive there. And he basically ended the Vuelta in week 1 last year. And
I do still remember from that Vuelta that we were always saying the third week is one of the easier ones in a Grand Tour we've had. This was a lot different than the Grand Tours we had this year. So I still need to see that truly Grand Tour very hard from start to finish where he has that consistency throughout. But I will say, we've had this discussion before when it comes to his Obisque performance. I always feel like after that first week, the amount of drama Remco went through in week 1, like the amount of times he's been shouting at cameras, the crash he had out to the finish line, that must sap energy. Like, that must be pressure and that must sap energy. And it wouldn't shock me if that has an influence on Obisk.
Yeah, of course. Stress causes your body, psychological stress causes your body to not recover as well. And that's obvious. So it's obviously not ideal. Or even physical stress caused from a crash, you are going to spend energy recovering from that crash. Even if, you cruise through the next 2 sprint stages, that it doesn't matter. You've still crashed and you got to recover from that in the race. So yeah, it wasn't ideal either.
Was that Giro or Vuelta?
Dog crashed. The Giro was even more. He crashed with Ballerini with the Trek lead out in a sprint stage. There's a dog that crashed him. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the dog didn't give him COVID.
Who knows? You never know. Anyway,
maybe Aaron Rodgers knows. Adam Yates, one of my favorite riders this year, the best British GC rider in the world, who was in his first year on UAE after being on Ineos, wins the main mountain stage of UAE Tour on her feet, third in GC there. Tirreno didn't suit him, really didn't suit him at all. That was a waste of his race days, frankly. He would have been better off, I think, training. Catalunya, massive crash in stage 1. I don't know how he came 5th the next day. Yep. He's in a really high-speed crash in Saint Feliu. Romandy goes then a month later, dominates the Queen stage on Tion, just kills everybody, wins GC there. Dauphiné second, and then there was behind Jonas, but then there was a big gap between Yates and the Hindley O'Connors of the world. And then Tour de France, he wins the opening stage. And as a domestique for Pog, he comes third. Then Burgos third, and that was his last race of the year. Stage race, sorry. So, you can't not have Yates in your top 5, I don't think.
I agree. I do have the feeling that I agree. They're very different races, but Roglic level of Vuelta is different to me than Giro level Roglic. I feel like he was at a higher level during the Vuelta, Roglic. And for that reason, in my head, if you put Adam Yates at Tour de France level in the Giro, I believe he competes for the victory there.
Yes, but I think that's impossible. I think no one, like we see every year, that the Watts are never as high in the Giro.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really dangerous to apply Giro, Vuelta Watts in particular. Like, say you look at Roglic, 2 different characters. Yeah. And so to assume Yates will be at his tour level at the Giro, I think is risky. I don't disagree with you. I think Yates can beat them in the Giro. And I think those mountain stages would have been nice for him too. I think it would have been really good. So I'm not disagreeing. Even Hindley. I think it was a good Giro for Hindley too, that third week. I just think it's risky. I think the Giro with the weather and all that, it can be way more random. But I agree. Maybe in a different count. Who was their leader? Almeida. Oh, man, Almeida and Yates as co-leaders would have been nasty in that Giro.
What is the ideal temperature for watt per kilo performances?
It's a little bit higher than running because you have the cooling from going from riding on the bike. I think it's a pretty broad range, to be honest. Like there's got done in 10 degrees, 15 degrees, 20 degrees probably.
Probably just not when it's ice cold and not when it's very hot.
Yeah, I think just 20 degrees. So it's not people aren't dehydrated because you obviously have to. It's not really Granon. People are like, Granon wasn't a super hot day, right? In the Tour 2022, Granon wasn't that hot. You know what was like the surface of the fucking sun? The Galibier. And if you have over 30 degrees, I tell people, if you have the opportunity, go to high altitude. Even 25 degrees, you will be like, holy shit, it is boiling. It was, I think, over 30. And so when Poggy did the huge effort on Galibier. So I think the heat before the effort is very, very important, more so even than, because guys rock up, UAE Tour, have feet, it can be 38 degrees, 37 degrees, but they ride at 100 watts for 2 hours. They go to the car every 10 minutes on the flat before her feet. They put eye socks. They keep their they're not riding at a high intensity, and they can do her feet at good watts. So I think temperature is an interesting thing, and I think it's the overall stage temperature is really important.
So are you telling me I've ridden up Ordino in -1 at the top? I've ridden up Ordino with 33 degrees at the top. If I ride up it with 20 degrees at the top, I will beat my time by like 10 minutes?
Depends how much the cold bothered you.
It did. My hands were freezing.
I don't think the cold would be too bad. On the way...
Mainly in the descent.
But if you had to do a descent in -1, and you started it really cold, then you might have a problem.
Yeah.
Anyway... Adam Yates, really, really good. I can't wait to see what they do with him next year, whether they actually take your advice, maybe Benji, and send him to that Giro d'Italia, because his TT is not bad at all.
Adam Yates and Sivakov, I want them to the Giro.
Ooh, that's interesting. Almeida, speaking of their Giro leader this year, podiumed that Giro d'Italia, won the Bondone, not the Queen stage, but kind of the hardest race stage.
Yeah.
Consistent. He's the model of consistency, even when he got sick and dropped on Obieski, somehow top 10s the Vuelta still, 3rd in Catalonia, 2nd in Tirreno, 6th in Algarve, 2nd in Bologna, doesn't win much. He won one race outside of the Portuguese NCs, which was that Giro stage this year, despite his decent sprint. He's the really tricky one for me, Benji, because him against, say, Thomas, who beats him in the Giro, but then Almeida's better all throughout the year, or against Remco, who I believe his peak level is higher, shown by the Vuelta, for example, in the first week, and shown by the Giro in the first week. But he's not. But he has his problems. That's where it becomes really tricky here.
I agree. When it comes to Almeida, I feel like obviously during the Giro, I've always been an Almeida fan. The Giro, the Almeida hype is pretty on every Giro. So if he doesn't go next year, I'll be very sad. But that being said, this was also his best Giro performance. Went from 4th to 6th to DNS because of COVID, on his way to a potential podium, likely to podium, to now actually securing that podium. So that's a step forward for him. Like getting that Grand Tour podium, that's a big step, was a big thing in Portugal and so forth. But he's not top 5 material for me. He's top 7 material for me, I think, in my list, if I think about it. So, and the reason for that is that I believe if he goes to the Tour de France, that he lands 5th, something like that, which...
Around Simon Yates and Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough as well with people gaining time in breakaways. Because that can sometimes muddy the waters.
Yeah.
But these days, that's also part of being a GC rider. Sepp Kuss won the Vuelta because he got in a breakaway. Yep. Guys took time. Simon Yates and Bilbao in that Col de la Loze breakaway. It's a very important part of being a GC rider. And
talking about him,
Almeida can't do that, by the way. He cannot get in breaks.
Talking about the Bald Eagle. Well, to be fair, he had that one breakaway stage in Cortina, Ampezzo.
No, but he was like out of GC there. Well,
Agreed.
I can't remember.
Yeah, he was properly out of GC after not feeding well on that stage 4, if I recall correctly. They then lost like 4 minutes or 6 minutes. Anyway, the Bald Eagle, Seppi Kuss, GC Kuss, as we proclaim him, he won La Vuelta. And yes, he did that through a Jumbo tactical masterpiece by having him in the breakaway, forcing others to chase him, and then him getting a bonus from that stage. But he also was the 3rd best GC rider in that race, which that is after his 2 teammates, but he was the 3rd best GC rider in that race, in my opinion. And if you look at that, you keep that in mind, his time trial got a lot better in that race. He did that after completing the Giro and the Tour de France as a super domestique. I have him higher than Almeida. I have him higher than Remco. I have him higher than Geraint Thomas.
Really?
Especially this year.
Thomas, I can see it because Thomas podiumed the Grand Tour, Kuss won one, and then neither of them really have the consistency outside of that in GC. I mean, Kuss has more so. He was top 10 in the Tour before Rodriguez wheel collapsed in front of him. So, I think it's actually very difficult to put an argument for Thomas ahead of Kuss on in terms of GC rankings. The interesting one is someone like Simon Yates to me, or like Yates, 4th at Paris-Nice, 2nd at TDU, DNF at Romandy, and then 4th at the Tour de France, and then they don't send him to any other stage races, which is a little bit curious, but he did farm a fair few points at the Classics. So, yeah, is Sepp Kuss better than Simon Yates? Was he a better GC rider than Simon Yates this year? I think yes. Because Simon Yates might have had trouble in that Vuelta. Maybe he's not 18 seconds behind Roglic on Angliru in the 3rd week of the Vuelta. And then Hindley, you're right. It's like these other guys don't have these results. Like they're not even podiuming other World Tour races, Benji.
Yep.
Like Hindley didn't podium a World Tour stage race this year.
Yep.
And so you can't say, well, what did Kuss do outside the Vuelta? It's like, well, fuck, he won it. And these guys didn't even podium one. Almeida's the one for me that's just, and Remco. Almeida came 3rd in the Giro on his own back, and then all those other results, I think. But it's always in the background a lot of the time. I don't know. It's personal preference. Has Almeida ever been at Sepp Kuss Vuelta level? Is that kind of your point? You don't, yeah, so.
But I also got this feeling about a lot of riders, like outside of Sepp Kuss. You mentioned Simon Yates. We have Carlos Rodriguez, for example, who pretty sure he crashed at the Tour de France in the final few stages.
He crashed a million times the last 18 months.
Yeah. And
A.S.O.
Jai Hindley also crashed at the Tour de France, which affected his GC.
For sure.
He finished 7th in the Tour de France, but probably could have competed for top 5.
I think so.
So I'm then looking at my positions 6 to 12, and I'm thinking, a Thomas, and Evenepoel, and Almeida, a Hindley, a Yates, and a Ayuso or Rodriguez. Where does Hindley fit in that, keeping in mind the damage that he had when it comes to injuries? Because despite the result at the Tour de France, I would rate him above Rodriguez. And despite Ayuso getting 4th at the Vuelta, which he would have podiumed to Vuelta if Jumbo arrived with one of their main leaders instead of 2 of their main leaders, with Sepp Kuss added on afterwards. I think Ayuso's Vuelta, I rate the same as his Vuelta last year.
It might even be better.
Yeah.
It might even be better, yeah. Like the gap shouldn't have been that big if the team rallied around him a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he tried to attack the next day on stage 14 after the Tourmalet stage, where they had no satellite rider. They paced with Novak for an hour, and then it's like, well, where's he going to go? You know, he was the only other GC leader trying things after that sort of Tourmalet destruction by Jumbo. So Ayuso, I think he had a tough season with the foot injury, and then he did Swiss a little bit undercooked. He did Romandy definitely undercooked. Like he suffered on Tion, but he won the TT. Swiss, he is 2nd and won the TT, and the descent stage where Gino Maeda passed away. He just had such a short season, 41 race days, and over half of them are at the Vuelta. So it's really tough to compare these guys because. Who else are we missing? There's Caruso. You mentioned Enric Mas, Carapaz. They all crash issues. Caruso is kind of, I think he might have podiumed the Tirreno. Don't really know.
4th in the Giro. Like, that's something I completely forgot.
what else did Caruso do?
Actually, don't know what else he did.
83 race days, man.
Fuck, that's a lot.
No, he didn't. Oh, he's 3rd at Romandy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, Romandy, Adam Yates, he franked out form then at Dauphiné in the Tour, but yeah.
We've gone through this list. I'm going to start with my ranking from position 12 to 6, and you're going to tell me if I'm stupid. I don't have 12.
I got top 5. You go, 12, you do your 12 to 5th.
I've got Carlos Rodriguez. I've got Ayuso above Rodriguez.
Yeah, I think that's undeniable.
I've got Simon Yates above that, roughly.
In 10th?
Yes. Maybe low, I don't know. I've got Hindley above Simon Yates.
Yep.
I've got Joao Almeida above that.
That's low for Almeida. 8th.
I've got Remco above Almeida and then Thomas in 6th.
I can't put Thomas that high.
Okay. I understand where you come from.
There's no way. Okay, he came second? He came one position ahead of Almeida on the Giro, and the same result effectively. And Almeida attacked on Bondone. Thomas bridged him, and Almeida won the stage. I know they pulled afterwards. And then Almeida has all those other GC results.
Yeah.
Not wins, I grant you, but still, Thomas has nothing.
Yeah.
Who would you rather have as the GC rider?
Well,
no, this year.
Almeida.
This year.
Almeida? I don't care if he comes second or third, it's a podium. Maybe that's just me.
I agree. No, I agree. You say podium.
Yeah.
Thomas did beat him marginally in the Lusari TT, but I think you're being tough on Almeida there.
Well, I support him enough at the Giro, so...
yeah, true, and he failed you. We were like, Almeida's going to win. Yeah, actually, fuck that guy.
No.
Overhyped, winless fuck.
No, we're not doing this.
Well, I can't say that because he won the Bondoni stage.
I remember when you called me out for calling him an overhyped winless fuck.
You called him and then he won the Bologna 2 stages and the overall the next week. He's a funny rider, man.
I was framed.
Okay, so that's your Almeida's 8th, Remco 7th, Thomas's 6th. That's your...
Yeah.
I think you're being a little bit harsh on Almeida, but yeah, largely, and a bit generous to Thomas, but...
I'm a harsh on Remco by putting him on 7th.
He didn't have a great GC year, did he?
No.
Second in Catalan, that was to Roglic though, and from him to Almeida and stuff was a big gap. Anyway, I'll start with my top 5. I have Remco Evenepoel 5th.
just after talking about him. Why?
I think I understand that he basically didn't achieve GC in either of the 2 Grand Tours. I'm just being so generous with the pass in the Giro. I'm just probably being overly generous. Otherwise, I would have Almeida here. I just think his level with the TT is just his peak level is so much higher than Almeida's. And I feel like COVID denied us with not just him, but also Gegenhardt. You know, Gegenhardt we haven't mentioned, but...
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, he crashed out of the Giro, but he won that Tour of the Alps. He looked absolutely brilliant. His TT was outstanding. You know, where would he be this year if that hadn't happened? But can't deal
Probably
too much in
the Giro.
Yeah.
I believe it.
So yeah, I have Remco ahead of, mainly because Almeida didn't win a stage race, but I guess maybe I'm overrating UAE Tour. Anyway, if people disagree with that, I accept it. 4th, I have Adam Yates. 3rd, I have Tadej Pogacar. 2nd, I have Primoz Roglic. And 1st, I have Vingegaard, obviously. So my other contender, I think Yates 4th is just like inarguable. That there's the 3 this year of Jonas, Pogacar, Roglic, whichever order you want. I think Yates in that tier of his own is inarguable this year.
Yes.
And then willing to have a discussion from 5th to 7th, 8th, that's debatable. But I guess my second contentious one is Roglic ahead of Pogacar.
Wait.
Yes.
Before we talk about that, we need to discuss the absence of GC. Where's he at?
Oh, yeah, probably around 7th to 9th region.
Really?
Yeah.
Winning the Vuelta? Obviously the tactics mattered, but he was still the 3rd best GC rider there.
He was.
I think you're being harsh on our American.
Probably. 5th at UAE Tour, 4th on Hafid. Catalonia, he was
Selangor, he dropped you on Bechalis?
Not so good. I mean, yeah, the Giro, he was... it's tough because he was a domestique in the Tour and the Giro. Like, I can't be like, oh, well, he didn't get good results in the Tour and the Giro. So, well, fuck, the guy was being a domestique.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, maybe, but no, I don't have him in my top 5. Sorry.
Heresy. Absolute heresy. But before we discuss...
Does winning a Grand Tour...
Oh?
Yeah, does that mean automatically you go into the top 5?
No, but the level he showed while winning that Grand Tour,
yeah, it was very good.
GC rider there for me is the one that tips it after already competing in 2 Grand Tours before that, where he could have achieve the top 10 if he rode for it. I see that as definitely this year deserving to be in the top 5, knowing that he might not have this every single year coming now. But
no, see, that's where I disagree.
Okay.
I think he'll be top 5 GC rider next year.
Oh, this is fascinating.
And clear.
I've got him like 7-8 or something next year.
Yeah, I mean that's not too far apart. But
switch around.
With Roglic out, man, I'm looking at the season program. Like, there's a lot of World Tour races here.
Yeah,
but I can't do all of them.
Before we jump to Pogacar versus Roglic conversation,
well, I need your ranking.
Exactly. I've got 5th GC Cus.
Okay.
4th Adam Yates. So relatively agreed on the 4th one. I've got Vingegaard in 1st, but I've got 2nd Pogacar and 3rd Roglic. And I'll add to that, I understand that you come with Roglic in 2nd because if you look at the results, his results are better than Pogacar this year.
Yep.
If you finish 1st at the Giro and you finish 3rd at the Vuelta, that's better than getting 2nd at the Tour de France.
And an extra 1 week World Tour win.
In an ideal world, my ranking would be both of them at the same spot in 2nd place.
So with the Palmares of Roglic clears Pogacar, why you have Pogacar ahead?
Because I don't judge the Col de la Loze 5 minutes loss as its usual level. And I think that's the thing where we differ.
Man, that's generous.
Maybe.
Roglic shut the bed on Bondone, lost 30 seconds on that stage.
Yeah, but he didn't lose 5 minutes.
He didn't. That's my point.
Yeah,
he didn't.
Fuck, I'm making your argument against mine. This is not how it's supposed to be. Now, I believe that if I put Pogacar and Roglic in the same Grand Tour, if Pogacar is at the Giro, he wins by minutes, not by 40 seconds for me.
I reckon Thomas beats him in the Giro.
I do not believe that.
We'll see. I think the Giro route for next year is good for him. I think this year not so good. Yeah, I just think if Roglic in the Vuelta had kind of been, you know, how in Tirreno he was scrapping with the second tier guys. Like he was scrapping with them and beating them in the sprint, and not by bike lengths either. Not like Giro dell'Emilia. He was like bike throw, beat you Damiano Caruso, Leonard Kamna, Giulio Ciccone. Catalunya bike through and lost to Ciccone on that sprint. If that had been like the Vuelta and it'd been like, you know, an Aronsol, he got not dropped but gapped and that was his level, and, you know, he sort of backdoors his way to 3rd, maybe I have Pog ahead of him. Because then Pog's level was just on, but then in the Vuelta he comes out in that 3rd week and just Anglerud just kills it. I'm like, well, you know, his level was also insanely high on that stage and surprised me. So he that clears it for me. I also think he doesn't. I think Pogacar goes into the Tour de France the Tour de France TT closer to Jonas than Roglic could have.
Yeah.
But I think Roglic finishes the Tour closer to Jonas than Pogacar did. Because I don't think he loses all that time on Col de la Loze that Pogacar did. But
I agree. Roglic would not lose 5 minutes on Col de la Loze. I also don't believe he would have been with Vingegaard on Col Terre still. I think that during the first 2 weeks of Grand Tour, he would have lost more time than Pogacar had.
Yeah, I agree.
But in the last week, he would have not lost as much. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. That's what I mean. So,
okay.
But these are all hypotheticals. So I just, in theory, Pogacar, not in theory, in reality, Pogacar is the, Roglic beat him in Basque Country before, and, you know, Roglic crashed out of the previous 2 Tours de France where he was the leader for Jumbo, but Pogacar is the better GC rider than Roglic. I think the level this year was close enough that Roglic's huge difference in Palmares in stage races swings it for me. Now, would I rather have Roglic or Pog next year in stage races? Obviously, I'd rather have Pog. I accept. I know that. So this is another one where how much do you rate what their peak level can be versus what do they achieve?
Yeah, maybe I'm generous in that argument, but I wouldn't mind having them both on 2nd place, like I mentioned. But also, I'm also looking at the future. I'm thinking, we made these rankings now. What will change in 2024? And one of the first things that comes to mind is the fact that Roglic will do the Tour de France next year as main goal. Gives him a solid chance of dropping in these rankings next year.
Yeah. And I think, like, what if Yates wins the Giro, wins a soft Romandy, wins UAE Tour, and then goes
Swiss.
and podiums the Vuelta afterwards? And then you're like, fuck, maybe he's third. Maybe he doesn't do anything. Yeah. So that's an interesting discussion. Let's forward think. And let us know, by the way, what your top 5 GC rankings. I'd like to know if anyone doesn't have Vingegaard first or if anyone that doesn't have Vingegaard, Roglic, Pogačar, Yates in their top 5 in some description. I'd like to hear an argument for that, whatever order. What's your top 5 next year GC riders, best GC riders in the world?
Jesus, this is unprepared, but I think Vingegaard remains first.
Okay.
I reckon Pogačar will be second. In the viewership hopes that he finds a way to solve his issue.
Yeah. Or he goes to Giro, wins, and then comes second in the Tour. Then he's still clear second.
Exactly. But who's going to be third?
Because you got Remco, could Ayuso improve? Where's Rodriguez margin? How will Roglic go at Bora Hansgrohe? Will Adam Yates have a good schedule?
Remco doing the Tour de France, I don't have in third. Because that's a risky move, doing the Tour de France. If he does the Giro and the Vuelta, there's a larger chance that he will be in the top 5 for me than by doing the Tour de France. Because he might just have the Carlos Rodriguez 5th or 4th result at the Tour de France, Adam Yates-wise. I think I'm going to go with Adam Yates going to the Giro and the Vuelta, and therefore I will have Adam Yates in third. It's going to be really close with Roglic for me. It depends on whether he finishes the Tour de France or not. Because if he finishes, he's going to podium. If he doesn't finish, he's going to be DNF. Obviously.
That's tricky.
Prediction.
And then 5th, where'd you have Remco? So you have Remco.
I've got Remco I've got Remco in 6th after João Almeida, who's going to... No, I don't... No. Remco in 5th, probably. And Ayuso's going to step up from 11th in my ranking now to 7th to 9th position.
I got Vingegaard first. I don't know, man. Pogačar probably second's pretty safe to go with, but
Hindley should go to the Giro again.
I agree. No?
Well, actually,
I think they're going to send Vlasov because it's got good TTKs and it could be a soft start list, and Kjan. Jonas Pogačar, 3rd. I have Adam Yates, 4th. Roglic. And then... Actually, that's not true. I got 4th Remco, and then 5th Roglic and Ayuso. I have... Because let's be real,
Yeah, but
Bora does not have the team around Roglic to put him in the situations for him to succeed the same way he did at Jumbo.
I agree, but when it comes to Ayuso, I'm also there's so many top dogs at that team now. And if I expect Yates to ride the Giro, then he's going to be doing the Tour de France combined with Pogačar.
I think Ayuso will do the... Yeah, true. I wouldn't send... I don't know if Yates should do the Tour. I think he might be better in warm conditions.
If you should do the Giro, you mean?
I think Yates might be better in the heat or in not so cold, but I'm making that up. But he's good in UAE, so...
I don't remember, but I reckon Adam Yates once came 4th in the Tour de France, right?
Yeah.
And the only stage I can remember from that Tour de France was him finishing in the rain on a stage that Dumoulin won. So in my head, he's good in the rain for some reason.
He came 4th in the Tour ages ago. It's 2016.
Yeah.
Now times have changed.
Remember when we were still seeing a fucking Grand Tour between Miguel Angel Lopez and Simon Yates for the Vuelta?
That was 2018, just 5 years ago. How things have changed. 2020 you would have had the list as Pogačar, then maybe people still would have had Roglic ahead of Pogačar in the end of 2020.
2018 and 2019 were truly transitioning years, right? Because the level in those 2 years are just, even if you don't look at the numbers, results-wise, you can notice that they weren't on the same level.
And also, like, the whole top 5 from 2019 is not in the top 5 now. Bernal, Geraint Thomas,
Buchmann.
maybe Steven Kruijswijk. I'm just reading out the Tour de France list. I can't remember the 2019 Giro
Emu Buchmann.
was. Nibali.
Hey,
retired. Carapaz.
Yeah, he would be winning otherwise if he wasn't retired.
Yeah. I think Carapaz might podium the Giro next year. But yeah, let us know what you think. Who will kick on next year? Is the art in scheduling? Is there actually a lot of parity between these riders, and on their day, like on his day, I think Jai Hindley can drop Primoz Roglic. But 95% of the time, Roglic will beat him in a sprint, beat him in a TT, and all those great things. And so even though in your GC ranking you would absolutely have Roglic ahead of Hindley, sometimes Grand Tours don't work out that way. If there's if there is a specific parcours, like we saw in the Giro 2022 on Passo Fedaya, where he cooked Carapaz. Geoghegan Hart hopefully has a bounce back year. Ayuso, maybe he'll improve. But yeah, maybe Sivakov, Benji. If Adam Yates has anything to go by, maybe he's in the top 10 next year.
Yeah. I will really enjoy seeing Sivakov doing Italian Classics at UAE.
Yeah, with that stacked team. Yeah, that team with an Italian Classics is already ridiculous, and yeah, he makes it even stronger. Is there anyone we're missing that could
like pop up out of nowhere?
I think Uiterbrooks is the only one who really I think could be in the top 5 next year.
And with Pidcock focusing on mountain bike Olympics, I'm also not feeling like he's going to solve that as a consequence of his focus on mountain bike Olympics, because mountain bike efforts are not Grand Tour efforts.
Yeah, I mean,
at least I'm not a mountain bike watcher, but that's how I feel about it.
I was about to say that he only did the Tour as a World Tour stage race. He actually did a fair few stage races this year, Benji.
Didn't he try
Algarve, Tirreno,
in the time trial,
Swiss, and the Tour? He did more World Tour stage race days this year than Pogačar.
Yep.
So I don't know. I don't know I think next year probably won't be the year if as you say, there's a huge focus on the Olympics, and that goes for maybe a fair few riders. Like, I'll be interested to see Filippo Ganna's schedule in particular, noting that he has the track and the TT Olympic gold, probably quite a big focus for him. But Dale Zadji, sorry, go on.
Could Matteo Jorgensen jump into the top 15 list?
15, yeah. Top 15, of course. Then to be top 15, you just got to, like, I don't know, podium UAE Tour, podium Catalunya, and then
Ayuso and Rodriguez are on 11 and 12 in my list here. So
yeah,
you got at least top 5 a Grand Tour.
Yeah, but he could top 5. I mean, to be honest, if Rodriguez comes 5th in a tour or a Grand Tour and does nothing for the rest of the year, and there's a guy who has more consistent results, I'd probably put them ahead of them in terms of overall GC, because 5th is still not winning, and so I'd rather have the guy that's getting consistent results throughout the year podiuming other one-week World Tour races.
Yeah, I would agree if it's the Giro de Vuelta, but the Tour is kind of like...
Yeah, the Tour is the big one.
Yeah, the big fish. But anyway, that's all I have to say when it comes to...
Maybe Ben Tullett podiums the Giro on Jumbo-Visma.
Possibly.
We'll see. Anything is possible. I wonder who Ineos GC leader will be, though, in those races. That's what who could be on Ineos, Benji? Because they still haven't announced. How are we supposed to start team previews? Movistar just did theirs. They got Cavagna and Formolo. Yeah. Ineos haven't announced anybody. Have they?
I have no clue. What's going to happen at Ineos. We'll see in the coming weeks.
Why are they waiting? Is it because of Ratcliffe buying Manchester United? A stake in?
I don't know. Like, I genuinely don't know what the reaning is behind it.
Because they're not merging with Movistar, that rumor. Because Movistar announced all those riders. So
exactly.
¿Qué pasa?
I think they're just waiting, and maybe they started late when just waiting for fun. They're doing an NEF.
It's the 2024 season has officially started.
Yeah.
We already had the first race of the 2024 season in Hong Kong.
Correct.
Jayco won it this morning. I don't know what they're waiting for. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just curious. Like,
talking about waiting, what have you been up to the last few days?
Making videos. UAE won the points ranking. yeah, did a video on that. That's about it, really. Not just chilling and going. I'm going to Paris on Wednesday. So we got the Tour de France route reveal on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Going to Paris for that, and then got the Rouleau Live November 3rd. So I'm going from Paris to London. So a little bit of, what am I doing in Paris? A little bit of sightseeing as well. Yeah, that's about it. Just kind of going to drive to Toulouse in the next few days. What have you been doing?
I feel like I've had this, like, what did I call it before the podcast started? This withdrawal symptoms of making podcasts. Because I'm like, every day I'm like, it's so weird that we don't have a podcast today. And now we have like the schedule of two podcasts per day, which I'm adapting towards now. So I've also just been spending all my time on making content, which, like, I spent the last 3 weeks going through a training program, hoping to get better and get back to form after being off the bike for 45 days. So if you want to know what my progress is in those 3 weeks, that's going to be a video that's up in the next couple of days. So that's also curious.
I've been running a lot. And so my legs hurt. That's also what I'm doing. Like, they really hurt. And also this is the time where I try to organize all the business stuff. The off season starts, and that's where I try to organize sponsors for the 2024 season for the podcast and advertisers. So this is where I do a lot of that stuff, or dealing with negotiating with A.S.O. or race organizers, saying, hey, can I have the rights to use the race footage for the next year? So I do a lot of that stuff. Sort of happens, as well as, I forgot the Umbo stuff. Like, so much season planning. Actually, that's actually taken up a lot of my time since the Vuelta. But yeah, all Italian classics. So it's been busier than I'd hoped, Benji. And maybe I go get bitten by bed bugs in the coming week. Luke said that Thymen Aronsson will be in the second best GC rider in 2024. So
where has he been since the Giro?
He crashed horrifically in La Vuelta.
Yeah. Sorry, damn it.
Yeah, he needed. Who's the lead out guy on Tudor?
The Dutch guy.
Dutch guy, yeah.
Not Rick Plumer, Zeilard.
Zeilard, yeah. He needs him to keep him safe up to the 3 kilometer rule. Okay. That's enough for today. We'll most likely see you next with our Tour de France 2024 men and women's route reaction coming later this week. Until then, ciao.